This presentation will give you everything you need to successfully pass your interview, advocacy and drafting exams for property law introduction and overview. Professional undertakings are promises given between solicitors that are enforceable by the Law Society. A property lawyer conducts due diligence, analyzing the nature of the property assets of a company, enabling a client to buy the company with full knowledge of any matters affecting the property. It is necessary to analyze title, to produce a certificate of title, to confirm to a lender that title is adequate for the lender, to use as security for a loan or mortgage. In a property conveyance, the seller wishes to transfer legal title to buyer without continuing obligations in relation to the property. The buyer wants to ensure that the seller has the right to sell the property and that any rights benefiting the property are transferred with the property. The National Protocol is a non-compulsory methodology which includes standard forms and documentation wherever possible. From early 2007, sellers of residential property will be obliged to compile a home information pack for prospective buyers. The pack will include the title to the property, replies to searches and inquiries, and a report upon the physical condition of the property, including an energy efficiency assessment. Stage 1 Pre-contract. Seller solicitor obtains details of the title to the property, obtains official copies of the title from the land registry, drafts the contract for the sale of the property in duplicate, and sends one copy of the contract to the buyer's solicitor, answers pre-contract inquiries and queries on the title raised by the buyer's solicitor, carries out pre-contract searches, raises pre-contract inquiries with the seller's solicitor, checks the seller's title to the property, ensures that the buyer has adequate funding in place, reports to the buyer upon the title to the property, the results of the searches and inquiries, and the terms of the buyer's finance, approves the draft contract. Stage 2 Pre-completion. Seller solicitor undertakes to discharge any existing mortgage on the property, approves the transfer deed, which is drafted by the buyer's solicitor, and arranges execution of the deed by the seller, replies to requisitions on title. On the day of completion dates the transfer deed. Buyer's solicitor drafts the transfer deed and sends it to the buyer's solicitor for approval, sends requisitions on title to the seller's solicitor. These are further inquiries dealing with the practicalities regarding completion, the discharge of any mortgage, the amount required on completion, and the bank account details. Requests mortgage funds from the buyer's mortgage lender. Requests monies from his client, the balance of the purchase price plus the costs of the transaction, including the search fees, solicitor's costs, stamp duty, land tax and land registry fees. Carries out pre-completion searches. On the day of completion, sends the balance of the purchase price to the seller's solicitor. Stage 3 Post-completion. Seller's solicitor reports completion to the seller, sends the dated transfer to the buyer's solicitor, sends the amount required to discharge the seller's mortgage to the mortgage company together with the form of discharge receipt for execution by the mortgage company, sends the balance of the sale price to seller. Upon receipt, sends to the buyer's solicitor the form of discharge duly executed by the seller's mortgage company. Buyer's solicitor reports completion to the buyer, receives the transfer from the seller's solicitor, sends amount due in respect of stamp duty land tax to HM Revenue and Customs, sends transfer, the buyer's mortgage, if appropriate, and fee to the land registry. Considerations in a property transaction. The grant or assignment of a lease of more than 7 years is now registrable. A solicitor must consider all relevant planning matters. Planning permission is therefore required for any building works or any material change in use. All trees within a conservation area are protected and may not be felled or lopped without the consent of the local authority. If building works are to be undertaken in relation to a property, the works must comply with relevant building regulations. Solicitors must consider whether contaminated land is an issue in every transaction. An owner or occupier, or even a mortgagee in possession, could be required to clean up polluted land. Capital gains tax is prima facie payable on the disposal of an interest in land. Note principal private residence exemption. Stamp duty land tax SDLT £0 £120,000 nil £120,001 £250,000 1% £250,001 £500,000 3% £500,001 plus 4%. A solicitor must be alert as to the possibility of fraud and money laundering. A spouse may have a statutory right of occupation under the Family Law Act. Sharers/cohabitees may have equitable interests by contribution to the purchase pounds. Professional conduct and client care. Solicitors owe their clients a duty of confidentiality. Rule 4 of the Code of Conduct. To act for both a lender and a borrower, a solicitor must establish the client's identity. A solicitor can act for buyer and lender provided there's no conflict of interest between the two clients. If the lender is an individual at arm's length or not a relative, the solicitor cannot act for both parties. Failure to honor an undertaking is professional misconduct. If a solicitor provides investment services advice known as regulated activities under the FSMA without authorization, this can amount to a criminal offense.